Warning! The following program... wait, sorry. I forgot I don't have video for this one, so, roll intro. Childe of Shade Reviews, review number 18. Zero Escape number 1. 999. 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors. You know, it's really no secret that, up until recent years, most video game stories tend to be terrible, or just not really good, and that's understandable for a medium that's roughly 40-something years old. Sure, the earliest recorded video game was introduced to the world in 1958, but until the boom of games in the 1970s and crash of 1983, they were rarely seen as nothing more than just toys or time killers for children, and that's a mindset that's still somewhat present today. Don't get me wrong, there are still plenty of old games with really good tales to tell, like Chrono Trigger, Majora's Mask, or even Metal Gear Solid that stood out for their time, but personally, up until recently is when we started to see narrative games begin to slide into the territory where they can be compared to other mediums such as film or literature. Video games are a unique form of entertainment, so much that forms of storytelling usually don't fit well into its mold because after all, player agency is the key to any game. Games like BioShock use player agency to showcase how unusual it is for a human being to rigorously and obediently follow orders from someone they don't know. Spec Ops: The Line uses player agency to showcase how sometimes the player's agency can affect more than just the player, and comments on just how ludicrous the choices can be sometimes. Recently, the world of games was graced with the indie darling Undertale that was chock full of references to the player's agency and multiple endings dedicated to those choices, as well as many fourth wall breaks that acknowledge the player directly. All those examples above are great games that deserve their own reviews and critiques on what they do and well and what they don't. But today I'm not talking about those games. Today I'm talking about a game that tends to fly under the radar whenever strongest gaming narratives are ever brought up. A little game that came out in November of 2010 that did okay in terms of sales, enough to warrant a sequel, but gained a very intense and very passionate cult following that has gone on to touch the writer of the series deeply. A game that I picked up 3 years ago with no idea of what to expect other than I thought the box art looked cool. A game that I thought for the time was one of the most atmospheric and strongest video game narratives I've played, and upon replaying is easily, in my opinion, the best video game story ever told. Ladies and gentlemen, that game is Zero Escape 1. 999. 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors. And I'm about to share with you why it's one of my favorites and why it fills my heart with so much joy. Stay tuned, for this ship is seeking, and we must seek a door embezzled with 9 that will lead us to salvation. Junpei is just your ordinary college student with problems trying to make it through life just like everyone else. He has no real direction with his life and is working on an exhausting part-time job that barely pays off his shoddy apartment. One night after working a double, Junpei comes home to find his window has been left wide open. Whenever he goes to shut it, he is suddenly attacked and gassed by a mysterious hooded figure that tells him he is about to partake in something called the nonary game. Junpei later wakes up in the cabin of what seems to be a ship, and after a short period of quickly examining his surroundings and noticing that there's a digital bracelet on his wrist embezzled with the number 5 on the screen, the window suddenly bursts and begins flooding the cabin. He later escapes after managing to avoid drowning and quickly finds 8 other people who are also desperately trying to figure out what exactly the hell is happening. With a loud screech, the intercom turns on and the kidnapper, identifying himself as Zero, announces that the 9 people present are to play the nonary game, where they must all go through certain doors with numbers painted on them, and in order to escape must seek a door with the number 9 on it. He also explains that the ship they are on will seek in 9 hours, and only certain players can get through certain doors. Any players that try to resist, or if the players fail to activate a device called a dead, located in the room that will be active for exactly 1 minute, will be penalized, and from there our cast consisting of Ace, Snake, Santa, Clover, Junpei, June, Seven, Lotus, and the 9th man must seek a way out. Now if I were to go into any more specifics about about the story of 999, I would pretty much have to delve into spoilers because 999 is primarily a suspenseful mystery, and once you know the mystery, well, it stops being interesting. However, there's still plenty to talk about in terms of characters, story themes, and overall execution, which the game does brilliantly. Starting with story themes, 999 is first and foremost a mystery thriller with a bit of horror elements mixed in as well. Just about everything that Junpei does or experience contributes to the overall narrative. It isn't like, though I hate to make the comparison here because I consider 999 a game first and foremost of other visual novel-esque games like Ace Attorney or Heavy Rain, where the extra content is what it says on the label, extra content. 999 has 6 different endings that all contribute in the plot in some way. Going any further would be spoilers. These different endings provide the player with different information about characters' past, their motivations, or what they did, and so on, all leading up to probably the best fourth wall break that I've ever experienced in a video game, and one that I doubt will ever be topped in my lifetime. Characters are also really well developed, especially considering how often other games and media present characters in situations like this. There's no overbearing asshole who has a vendetta against someone in the group, or obviously evil and sinister culprit that's supposed to be the red herring. Everyone here is written like a real person, confused about the situation they're in and wanting desperately to get out of a slowly sinking ship and back into the safety of their families. That being said, not everyone is completely honest either. Some of them are hiding something, be it a dark twisted side, a good idea of what exactly is going on, or information that could change the world. Speaking of information, the world of 999 is almost parallel to ours in terms of realism and observation. Anyone who's playing the game shouldn't be surprised to find out many of the stories and studies presented in the game are actually based off debunked theories or urban legends. Ice-9, the gigantic, morphogenetic field theory are all present here, and that's how the story of 999 packs so much punch. It's realistic. I can say 100% without any exaggeration that 999 feels like a piece of fiction that could have happened in the real world, and because of this it adds so much to the events that happen. Actually, all character motivations make sense over time, and when all the secrets have been revealed, it all ends in an emotional climax that had me in tears during both my first and second playthroughs of this game. I know, I'm being incredibly vague here, and I kind of have to whenever talking about a plot-heavy game such as this. But let me say that if you love story in video games, then by all means play this game. It's easily the finest game-related story that I've ever played, and I'm more than likely going to gush about it until the end of time. But enough gushing for right now, because our bracelets are counting down right now and we need to find the dead in the room labeled gameplay. 999 first and foremost is a puzzle game akin to games like Ace Attorney or Professor Layton, though admittedly with much more serious tone compared to either of those two games. Whenever Junpei enters one of the room escape sections, he is tasked with extensively seeking a way out, whether that be finding a key or blowing a hole through a door in the room. Nearly all of 999's puzzles are logic and mathematical based, so if you happen to be good at those particular subjects, you should have very little problem making your way through the game. For example, whenever Junpei wakes up in a cabin that's being flooded with water, he eventually reaches the door only to find out it won't open until he uses a set of cards to find the digital root of the number on the door. There will be an image on this screen explaining this further, but needless to say, anyone with the basic mental addition skills know how to make 5. You would need 4 plus 7 plus 3, which equals 14, and 1 plus 4 equals the digital root of 5. Though there's also a built-in calculator to do the work for you if you need help. Though there's all sorts of puzzles like this, including codes, hexadecimals, Morse code, chemical formulas, and all sorts of stuff that, for the most part, works pretty well. 999 isn't one of those games where you either have to be a genius to enjoy it fully, because for the most part everything you need to solve puzzles is in the room with you, and thankfully don't involve a lot of brain busting to solve them. As far as controls go, they're actually pretty rock solid despite being fairly limited in scope. Like in most DS games, there's a large emphasis on using the stylus to examine items in various locations in the room. For the most part, almost all of them respond incredibly well, and they should, considering how late the game came into the DS's life cycle. While I do think the controls are pretty solid, I do have a couple of really minor gripes with the game. First and foremost being the fast forward system that lets players skip over parts of the game they already played, and the other is a certain escape room called the library. Starting with the fast forward system, while I do understand while it's there, I really just wish there was a skip to the next scene option, because oftentimes holding down the button can be a chore after 2 minutes of waiting to get where you need to be. Yes, I know, if we had a skip button, that would mean we would miss tiny life lines of dialogue that contribute to small theories scattered across the story, but this is one of the few areas that I think the sequel handled better. Next there's the library, and this is a testament of having too many things to examine can be a massive killjoy to the player. I won't go into specifics, but needless to say there's roughly 50 different things to examine in the room, and besides the small hexadecimal puzzle that for the life of me I couldn't figure out, was the only area where I went to a guide to see what exactly I was doing wrong. Other than that, I really do adore 999's overall design, and I think that anyone with even a somewhat functioning brain can understand how to get over the various puzzles that Junpei must face. That combined with the wonderful use of various replays and the player must do to get a full understanding of the big picture, 999 is truly a unique puzzle game that absolutely deserves all the praise it can get. But with that, I think we've spent enough time in this room, so should we go examine the grotesque dead body and see what exactly caused this unfortunate fate? Shall we? You know, going into this, I was really expecting to have a lot more to say about the presentation, but really, it's just the sprite work and F&B sections that are the only real standouts. Yes, unfortunately, when 999 came out to the West on the Nintendo DS in November 2010, it was running on very underpowered hardware that was fast approaching 6 years of age. However, it's held together by fairly stellar F&B sections that hold up pretty well today. It adds so much to the chilling atmosphere of being stranded on a sinking ship with an omnipotent and caring entity watching from the shadows. As stated earlier, sprite work for the fictional characters is fairly top-notch, at least as far as visual novel characters go, with a wide variety of reactions and some often heart-stopping expressions that immediately fill you in whenever the tone makes a 180. In terms of favorites, I would absolutely say that June's various expressions often fill me with laughter, and it makes that particular scene in the elevator all the more memorable. Anyway, that's all I really have as far as comments go, and if you see screenshots of the game, you probably know why. It's not technically impressive nor particularly memorable, but it's nice and can easily stand apart from most other games this kind of setting, and Kinu Nishimura did a great job diversifying it. So with that, maybe we should play a couple tunes on this piano, shall we? Now, unlike the presentation, there's quite a bit more to talk about in terms of soundtrack, because I feel it's quite stellar, even though some people seem to disagree with me. As far as atmospheric soundtracks go, 999 definitely knows how to give you goosebumps and hit you with what you need to feel during certain parts of the game. My personal favorite tracks are Chill and Rigor, which plays during the more somber scenes of the game, Morphogenetic Sorrow, which plays during the emotional climax of the game, and 9 Years, which plays during the epilogue of the game. Over the time, I've heard several criticisms for the soundtrack, including that it was unappealing and scratchy sounding, like it was being played out of Atari 2600, and I just don't get those complaints.
The soundtrack to me didn't really stand out all that much. It just seemed to kind of accentuate some of the tensions and stuff that were happening throughout. So I found it a little unremarkable, but it did a good enough job of underscoring everything.
I did have a track that stood out, and it was the track that played during the laboratory puzzle. And it was because it was so distracting and so unsuitable for what was happening. It stood out a mile. If there was any one area I would criticise this game, it was its soundtrack. That said, it's so story-based and it's so full of reading and pseudoscience and whatnot that the music is really relatively unimportant. It didn't overly impact my enjoyment of it, but in terms of the soundtrack, didn't completely unremarkable. Several tracks I didn't like, although there's one track that plays through the majority of the game, and I swear that's just the Midgar music from Final Fantasy VII.
Unappealing, yeah, I don't know about you, but most of the tracks are trying to convey fear and remorse, and that would by no means call those emotions happy and cheerful. Heck, if you want happy and cheerful, go listen to 9 Years and Recollection, because they're both on the soundtrack to convey moments of happiness and joy which you so desperately want. Really, the only criticism I can come up is that, as far as scratchy sounds go, I kinda understand that there. The DS's sound chip isn't the best, and name a soundtrack from the Nintendo DS library that stood out to you. Anyone? Yeah, I didn't think so, and I certainly don't think the opening helped against the fight against the naysayers either. It's by no means bad, but it's something that the sequel did way better. Yeah, I know, I'll talk about that one later. But for the most part, I think this soundtrack for 999 is superb at setting an atmosphere and conveying the feelings you should have in certain scenes, but at the same time, it isn't really something I would listen to on the bus on the way home from work. If you love atmosphere, you'll enjoy it, and with that, let's move on to the finale, shall we? You know, there's nothing really like going into something with no expectations and just being blown away by it. When I originally played 999 3 years ago, I knew it was special, and I always wanted to be sure that it just wasn't a one and done deal. The problem with getting older is that oftentimes you begin to see things' faults more than their strengths, and you often wonder why you ever liked the thing in the first place. But amazingly, that wasn't the case here. 999 is definitely a game that will stand on its own whenever years roll by. It's a tried and true example of how sometimes focusing on what you're doing right and trying to deliver on something people have never experienced before can truly touch you, and there's only so many times I can tell you to pick up this game, so go do it. 999 is one of those games I put aside whenever I mention my top 10 games, because I wanted to make sure I wasn't overreact whenever I would unironically say that it's the best video game story ever told. Having experienced 3 more years of the medium, including its sequel too, I can stand by that statement ironclad. Before, 999 was only number 11 or 13 in terms of my favorite games of all time, but now it's been bumped up to number 4 in terms of importance to me. I absolutely love and adore this game, and whenever someone asks me to give them recommendations of a game they've never played, this will absolutely come to mind. I'll say it again that I love 999, and if third game in the series that comes out at the end of this month, June 2016, succumbs to the curses of threes, I'm still gonna love this game affectionately till the end of time. There's plenty of media in my life that I can say has changed me as a person, whether it be the social acceptance and finding of one's true self in Persona 4 Golden, the tried and true testament of Bioshock, where I found out I loved games and I wanted them to be in my future, or the vast open sea and true sense of adventure I got from The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. This game is one of those, and I can only hope it becomes one of yours too, dear viewer. With that, I have rounded up all the contestants and have decided to give scores to story, gameplay, presentation, sound, and overall enjoyment of the game. Starting with story, which gets an absolutely perfect 10 for being the cream of the crop whenever it comes to storytelling, and one that's never going to age as far as time goes on. Next, there's gameplay, which gets a solid 8.5 for having a good foundation and plenty of replayability, but suffering a bit due to the game's structure and fast-forward mechanics. Succeeding from that is presentation, which gets a solid 7 for having great art and distinct visual style that's supported by solid FMV sections, but that's about it. Not far from that is sound, which gets a great 9 out of 10 for its wonderful atmospheric soundtrack and memorable tunes that play during emotional scenes of the game. Lastly, there is enjoyment, which gets a phenomenal 10 out of 10 for being a wonderful game I love and will love till the end of time. Tallying all the scores together, I ultimately award Zero Escape 1, 999, 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors, with a penultimate 91%, and give the recommendation to play it whenever possible. I've gone on and on about how much I love this game, and I'm probably kicking myself in the editing chair right now, so just know if you pick up this game, you should not be disappointed. In terms of availability, you can get the game on both Nintendo DS for $20 US or on iOS for $5 US, and that is available on Amazon. Now, before you guys take the easy option, let me tell you that the iOS version only contains the visual novel segments of the game. By extent, is an actual visual novel, which is not the best way to experience in my opinion, despite the better resolution. Pick your poison, because I think the DS version is much better, but that's just me.
Beep 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 beep. This just in. Apparently 999 is coming to Steam. No confirmation yet in it. There is possibly a Vita port due to some vague wording from the creator Kotaro Uchisoshi, but it's coming. Considering Danganronpa came to Steam, it seems likely.
In terms of recommendations, I'll start with the obvious one, which is Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc for its similar setting and atmosphere, but kind of being tonally different for those wanting a more serious game. Next, there's the obvious one that I made early in the review, Ace Attorney. Kind of pick whichever one. I haven't played them personally, but I've heard really good things about it from fans, and if you really like visual novels, this isn't a bad one to pick. Anyway, thanks again for watching, everyone, and tune in for another review coming real soon, and hopefully it will be available by the end of the month. Big thanks to Marlo and Silent Bleeding for the subs, and I look forward to seeing you guys soon. Until next time.